Hello, my name is Ji-young Seo, a master's student at the Graduate School of Artificial Intelligence, and I will be presenting for our deep learning midterm session. The title of my presentation is A Large-Scale Benchmark for First-Person Hand Action Recognition with Hand-type Taxonomies. The presentation will proceed in the following order. First, I will introduce the research topic and the related task. Next, I will briefly go over previous related studies. Then I will explain the dataset curation process, followed by the proposed method, ongoing experiments, some key problem statements we've encountered, and finally, our future plans. To elaborate further on the research topic and related tasks, my work focuses on curating data specifically for hand-object interaction scenarios, and then demonstrating the utility of this curated dataset by applying it to downstream tasks such as hand action recognition. As you can see in the attached image, in sequences where different hands interact with objects like opening the cap of a juice bottle, the grasp type can be categorized into hand types such as tripod and dynamic tripod. Based on this, my research aims to explore how incorporating hand type information and object labels into the dataset can lead to improved performance in hand action recognition tasks. This slide covers the related prior work. The first study I'd like to mention serves as the baseline for our dataset. In this paper, the authors utilized thermal imaging captured by inframed cameras to propose a method for segmenting hand regions in hand-object interaction sequences. They demonstrate the effectiveness of this method through performance on a segmentation downstream task. The RGBD and thermal video sequences recorded in that study form the foundational baseline for our dataset. The second related work is the functional hand type paper from BMVC 2023. We used the hand type estimation model proposed in this study to annotate each frame in our dataset with hand type labels. The baseline model in this paper is an extended version of HTT, a hand action recognition framework that was accepted at CVPR. Next, I'd like to introduce the HTT model, short for Hierarchical Tempo Transformer, which was presented at CVPR. This model predicts 3D hand poses and object information from RGB videos and uses them to perform hand action recognition. In the lower part of the model, called the pose block, it extracts hand pose and object labels, while the upper action block generates action tokens by considering temporal context and uses them to predict the final action. Notably, the hand poses is trained with supervision using 3D annotations, and the overall architecture is highly modular by design. Our constructed dataset is an expanded version of the original BMVC 2020 dataset. We've significantly expanded it in terms of the number of sequences, action labels, object, and tool annotations, and additionally included hand type annotations. As shown in the table on the right, both the total number of frames and the class diversity have been greatly enriched, allowing for more fine-grained and effective training. The hands type annotation in our dataset were generated using a pseudo-labeling approach based on the hand type classifier proposed in the BMVC 2023 paper. The diagram on the right shows the architecture of this model, which extracts morphological features from RGB frames to classify functional hand types. Using this module, we were able to automatically assign hand type labels to a large number of frames in our dataset. Also, our dataset includes index-based labeling for a total of 34 object categories and 29 tool types. Compared to existing hand-object interaction datasets, ours stands out by including a diverse set of object labels and supporting not only RGB, but also depth and thermal modalities. Importantly, our dataset is annotated with both action and hand type labels. However, since it lacks annotations for object pose such as bounding box coordinates and hand pose such as 2D and 3D joint coordinates, it presents challenges when applied to certain downstream tasks such as pose estimation. To improve the dataset's utility, we are currently exploring techniques for adding pose annotations as well. Here are a couple of example image frames from our dataset. This diagram provides a condensed overview of our baseline model pipeline when using only RGB images as input. To briefly explain the process, the input images is first passed through a ResNet backbone for feature extraction. The extracted features are then fed into a local transformer, after which they are used to train two modules, the object tool multi-level classification module and the hand type estimation module. The prediction features from both modules are combined with the original RGB features, flattened, and then passed through a global transformer. Finally, the hand action recognition module is trained on this global feature, producing the final hand action prediction. Next, this diagram shows our previous pipeline for action recognition using all three modalities, RGB, DAPS, and Thermal. In this setup, features extracted from each modality are fused earlier, either through linear projection or cross-attention mechanism, before entering the local transformer. While the RGB-only baseline achieved the best performance at around 86% accuracy, we observed a performance drop of about 3 or 4% when using all three modalities together. As a result, we are now shifting our focus to experiments using either RGB only or a combination of RGB and Thermal with a newly integrated pose estimation module. This slide presents a summary of our experimental results in the form of a performance table. We observed that using RGB input only alone yielded the highest accuracy at 86.75% accuracy. On the other hand, using depth or thermal inputs individually resulted in a significant drop in performance. Furthermore, even in the multimodal fusion experiments combining RGB, depth, and thermal, performance decreased when applying simple feature concatenation or cross-modal attention fusion methods. This slide shows a comparison of action recognition performance across different datasets baseline. Unlike existing RGB-only datasets like H2O and FPHA, our MHAB dataset features a multimodal setup that includes not only RGB but also depth and thermal data. However, we observed that the simple fusion strategies such as linear concatenation or cross-modal attention actually led to performance degradation. This highlights the need for more effective strategies to integrate multimodal information. The current HDT backbone and our baseline models are all designed to operate on RGB-only input. However, despite having access to additional depth and thermal data, we've found that these modalities often present challenges. For example, objects may not be visible in the depth or thermal views while only the hand is clearly captured. Due to such discrepancies across modalities, we concluded that conventional multimodal fusion strategies are unlikely to yield performance improvements in action recognition under these conditions. This is the action prediction confusion matrix for our RGB-only model. As highlighted in blue on the right, the model tends to confuse pairs of opposite actions such as unassemble vs assemble, unscrew vs screw, and unclamp on table vs clamp on table. Based on this observation, we considered integrating a pose estimation module using joint coordinates to provide more fine-grained motion cues. At this point, we also began exploring how our thermal modality could support pose estimation. Since our dataset does not contain ground truth pose annotations, we are looking into training the pose module using unsupervised or self-supervised loss functions that do not rely on ground truth labeled data. To explore possible directions, we first reviewed prior work that utilized 2D hand pose for action recognition. In the paper In My Perspective in My Hands, we authors propose a 2D key point detection module called F-hand-EgoNet, which functions similarly to MediaPipe. They pattern the key point features from both object pose and hand pose, then add positional embeddings before feeding them through two transformer encoder blocks. The output is passed to an MLP classifier to predict action levels. In this setup as well, the pose estimation model is trained in a supervised manner using datasets like H2O and FPHA, which contain ground truth pose annotations. This slide presents a performance comparison using pose estimation. Among the models compared, the one that incorporates 2D pose estimation, unlike our current HTT baseline, shows superior performance in the action recognition task. This result highlights the effectiveness of incorporating pose estimation. Given that our dataset lacks ground truth pose annotations, we have decided to start by using 2D key points as a proxy for ground truth. This makes experimentation more feasible, and we are currently testing the integration of a pose estimation model based on this approach. First, we tested some well-known 2D key point detection models, namely MediaPipe and OpenPose, on several sequences from our dataset. As shown on the left, even in cases with only one visible hand or pressure occlusion, the models produce reasonably accurate results. Currently, we are using MediaPipe to extract key point coordinates for each frame and saving them as CSV files. We have successfully run this process across our entire dataset over 670,000 frames and have collected the full set of results for further analysis. In addition to the learning-based annotation pipeline mentioned earlier, we also explored a simpler approach to generating 3D joint annotations. Specifically, we attempted to reconstruct 3D joint coordinates by combining the 2D key points extracted via MediaPipe with our dataset's depth binary values. Using camera parameters, we applied inverse mapping to estimate the 3D positions. As you can see, the 2D key points, particularly the X and Y coordinates, were relatively accurate when viewed from a top-down perspective. However, as expected, in regions where the hand and objects are occluded, the depth values became noisy. This led to significant drops in accuracy when viewed from the side, making it difficult to use these results as reliable 3D ground truths. So we decided not to proceed with this method for 3D annotation pipelines. This is our current customized version of the baseline HTT model, which is being trained on the server with an added 2D pose estimation module. We based our design on the pose module from the In My Perspective in My Hands paper. In our setup, the 2D pose features are passed through a transformer encoder and an MLP, and the resulting features are concatenated with the flattened RGB features just before the action classifier. The goal is to evaluate whether this integration improves overall performance, particularly for distinguish between opposing action sequences. While it would be ideal to also apply a dedicated loss to train the pose module itself, for now we are proceeding under the assumption that MediaPipe provides sufficiently accurate pose estimates, so we are using its inference outputs directly as a feature input without additional training for the pose module. Finally, I'd like to share our future plans. On the experimental side, we will continue evaluating the effectiveness of the pose module, and based on its performance, we will reconsider whether full ground truth annotations are necessary, possibly exploring manual or semi-automatic annotation strategies. Moving forward, as suggested by our advisor, we are also planning to explore the use of LLMs like Mamba to better capture long-term temporal dependencies. We will consider replacing our current transformer backbone with Mamba to see if we can enhance sequence modeling. This is the end of my presentation, and thank you for attention.